no one is listening, then how can we begin to get anything done? Joining us now is the Washington Bureau Chief for BuzzFeed and the cycle's favorite tattooed Politico, John Stanton. John,
Yeah.
with us.
What's going on, guys?
So one of the ironies here is Congress tends to be a bit skeptical of the Fed, and yet because of their dysfunction, they have essentially handed all of the economic power over to Janet Yellen and the Fed.
Yeah, it's interesting, and I think she's been pretty good about having a steady hand. I think that, watching some of her press conference, she was pretty realistic about things. She said that there are still headwinds in front of the recovery, that it's been disappointing, but that they are going to continue sort of on the course that they're on, and that she does believe that, they're going to get to their inflation targets and other benchmarks that will start to mark a path forward a little bit more aggressively. But, Congress really has very little ability to do much in this political climate. The Senate Democrats want to do lots of things. House Republicans have their own ideas, and they're just so polar opposite. It really is up to the Fed and Janet Yellen to do any of the work that's going to get done at the federal level.
See, no, you're absolutely right, obviously, about what's going on in Congress. We have gridlock. None of the ideas on either side can actually get enacted. But, it's a midterm, right? The election is right around the corner. We're talking about that a lot. That even if there's no movement in Congress, what the Democrats are doing is framing themselves as people who are for policies that will help working people, right? Unemployment insurance, minimum wage, those sorts of things. And Republicans are framing themselves, or being framed as people who are blocking policies that will help working people, or people who want to work. This seems to me to be a framing that is electorally valuable for Democrats.
Absolutely. I think it's interesting that the Republicans, after the last election, in the last sort of 4 or 5 months, really sort of bought into this idea of let's have a fight over income equality, over helping the poor, but they haven't really done much except that as a battleground. And whereas Democrats have been trying to roll out some policies, and they have sort of the traditional background of agenda items they've done or pursued, and that allows them to do things like talk about minimum wage, which I don't think is going to get done this year, although stranger things have happened in an election year. But it does give them the ability to sort of create their own narrative going into November, when, given the fact that they're facing things like the foreign policy problems that the president's having right now and Obamacare, they need something that they can work from, and this is, I think, going to help them a little bit.
So, John, that raises an interesting question. You have the president giving local interviews to press folks in local markets, pushing minimum wage, but Politico had a story yesterday talking about how the rich are striking back against the populist message that's sort of been the mantra for at least the last year. Which do you think is right? In your last answer, you said that this populist message could be something that the Democrats could work with going into November, or is it what Politico is reporting, that the rich are the ones who are driving the agenda within the Democratic Party?
Oh, I think that the wealthy have always had a role, I think, in some of this stuff. I think that it's odd to watch wealthy people come out and start talking about this. They typically come across a bit tone deaf when, frankly, they start talking about these issues. And I think, Democrats, as long as they keep it to, this sort of notion of income equality, trying to lift people up, not going too far towards like a living wage, but increasing the minimum wage, those are the kind of things that I think a lot of Americans, at least resonates with them to a certain degree. Whether or not that can overcome their distrust of the president or just the sort of the general malaise of a midterm election, I'm not so sure, but that helps them out a lot. And having really wealthy folks come out and attack them, that also benefits them, I think, frankly.
Right. Well, and you say stranger things have happened. Maybe we'll see movements on this, but the reality is the president has been traveling the country talking about raising the wage, having a wage that the American people deserve, and yet we've seen very little action on the receiving end. Not much has come of it. You have Republicans that say this is simply a non-starter. This is what John Boehner said recently. The president's policies are making it difficult for employers to expand employment, and until the president's policies get out of the way, employers are going to continue to sit on their hands. So, John, is his agenda a dead issue, or do you really see something happening over the next 2 years?
I don't, honestly. I think maybe there might be something right after the election in the lame duck, but I think at that point he becomes a real lame duck president. The attention turns to the 2016 election, and I don't know that, especially if he loses the Senate, he can get anything done with two houses that are controlled by Republicans. But again, the Clean Air Act amendments in the 90s were passed during an off-year election. There are sort of these weird moments that come up in July or August, September that create space for things to happen in a year like this. So I won't say absolutely not, but I would be highly surprised if something did.
So you're saying we got a chance. 1 in a million. All right, John Stanton, thank you as always.
Thank you.
And